Mike Mills with Verity Mortgage here today again. This is my great friend, Tiffanie Williams. She is with Fair Texas Title here in Mansfield, Texas. And in this, series of interviews or whatever you want to call it, I always like to start with people that I know that are fantastic at what they do and I find interesting. And Tiffany's one of these people that her and I actually talk on the phone quite a bit. And it's not always about real estate related stuff. We have many conversations about many things. And I was telling her actually when we were starting this out today that I was very disappointed in myself because I wore my Chris Stapleton concert shirt today, which I should have been more proactive and made sure that I had my Guns N' Roses or my Red Hot Chili Peppers shirt for her because this isn't really her cup of tea. Right?
I don't even know a Chris Stapleton song.
So she's much more hard rock. I know, looking at her just from here, she's dressed so professionally today. You don't see this, but 90% of the emojis that I get from her when we text each other is the horn sign that she sends over. So thank you very much for sitting with me today. I really appreciate it. This particular episode is going to be geared towards some of our real estate partners. Simply because I wanted to sit down with somebody in the title business to get just a better feel on, what they do. I mean, we know, but, at the end of the day, a lot of times I think title companies kind of get lost in the shuffle for what role they play in a real estate transaction, whether it be a refinance or a purchase, or sometimes just transferring deeds for individual buyers once they own homes, whatever the case may be. So Tiffany's way smarter at this stuff than I am, so it's much better to hear it coming from the horse's mouth than it is for me trying to explain something like that. So that's why I had her join us today. But just like every other time, my intent is always, first, I want to find out a little bit about you.
Okay.
Now, again, I've known Tiffany a long time. She's fantastic. She does all of my refinance deals, which she's great at. And so I actually know her pretty well. But for anybody that's, the 7 or 8 people that'll watch this, we want to make sure that they have a pretty good sense of who you are, because generally speaking, people like to do business with people they know.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you got to Mansfield, how you got into the title business, all that kind of fun stuff.
Okay. Well, Tiffanie Williams, Fair Texas Title. I have been in the Mansfield area my whole entire life. My family is from Mansfield, so there's a long line of us that grew up and graduated. I actually was the last class to walk down the old Mansfield High School.
Okay, so you're really old is what you're telling us now.
Well, rude, but yeah.
Yes. So Mansfield High School is where you graduated?
Mansfield High School is where I graduated, class of 2000.
Okay.
And then...
Well, I'm older than you then. So
well, yeah, I know. And then... stayed local, went to Tarrant County College, and then stayed in the area. And I've been living back in Mansfield. I've kind of been back and forth between Arlington and Mansfield, but in the Mansfield area my whole entire life.
Okay.
Born in Arlington.
Yeah, and where'd you meet your husband?
At a restaurant locally off Cooper Street named El Arroyo.
Oh, okay.
We bartended together.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's how Susan and I met. We met the same way. We were I was bartending and she was waiting tables at a restaurant. Okay, cool.
Yep.
And you have a little girl.
I have one daughter. She's just turned 8.
Yes.
Lily.
And I believe you just got back from Disney World.
I did get back from Disney World. I'm very tired right now.
So tell us about that. How was that?
It was everybody in the whole entire world was there when I was there.
So COVID wasn't slowing anybody down?
Nobody cared about COVID there. No.
Okay.
No.
Well, it is Florida.
You also will walk at least 39 miles a day.
Okay.
Your feet will hate you.
Yes.
But what's nice about it is that you eat all the stuff and you don't gain any weight.
Because you're just walking all the time.
Because you just walk all the time.
So if anybody that is planning on going to Disney and you had maybe 2 or 3 things that you would say, make sure you do this, or make sure you don't do this, what would you think? Make
sure you do not go on a Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay. Stay away from holidays.
Stay away from holidays. And what to do? Well, it just really depends on if you have a girl or a boy. Or I would say definitely go to Animal Kingdom. Definitely ride the Tower of Terror. That was my favorite thing ever.
Okay. Now that's the one where you sit inside the box and they get the screen on the front?
No, it's the one where you go up into the escalator.
Right.
And then it drops you.
Right. So, but you're like in an elevator box and they've got the screen. So it looks like you're going
You're in the twilight zone.
Right.
Yes, it's the twilight zone. Yeah. And so they just continuously drop you over and over.
Yes, we rode that when we went long time ago. And the funny part of that is, Tower of Terror, my son Troy, I think he was like 6 maybe at the time, and Katie Jane was probably 7 or 8 years old, and we were walking up to the building and Susie's like, I don't think we should do this. I'm like, no, it's gonna be fine, like no problem. I'm like, let's do this, let's go inside, let's look at it, see what the ride looks like, and if it doesn't look too bad, then we'll be fine. And so we go in there and I see people standing in line and they open a door so you can kind of see into the thing. I'm like, it looks like a movie theater chair. It didn't even have like one of those big things that you pull over the top. I'm like, it's not gonna be that bad. Yeah. Well, my daughter was still terrified. She wasn't gonna go. But Troy, because he's like, yeah, Dad, let's do it. So he decides he's gonna go with me. And then we get in there and I realized maybe about 3 or 4 minutes into it that probably made a bad decision. The hilarity of, I'm there. Obviously I have my 5 or 6 year old son. He's literally the youngest kid anywhere close to being in that room. And we're going up and down and up and down. He's freaking out. And of course the ride's over with. I open the door. He comes walking out and he's just like crying. Like, oh my God. No. Yes. And Sue's like, I told you. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I enjoyed that ride a lot, but
it was my favorite ride.
Yeah, probably shouldn't take the kids.
I noticed that the simulated rides make me feel sick.
Yeah. Oh, just because with all the
no, something about the 3D and stuff, and so if I stick to the old school roller coasters, I don't puke.
How'd you do on the Harry Potter ride?
I wanted to puke.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though you were moving around on the arm and the whole deal, but just the fact that you were on the screen?
I noticed it when you were on the third, when he was doing the Quidditch race. Yeah. It got me.
Yeah. Yeah. You didn't throw up on anybody that did?
No, I did not throw up on anybody. But it was, I'm getting old.
But you did not get to go to Epcot.
I did not go to Epcot.
It's unfortunate as an adult. If you've never been to Disney World and you plan on going, go to Epcot as an adult because you get to drink and eat all the way around the park.
See, we're stupid.
I know. Well, I wouldn't say you're dumb. You went there for the kids.
Yes, I did.
You were unselfish.
My child had an amazing time.
Yes.
And she will never forget it. And she wants to go again next week.
That's right. Well, of course. Yeah, they always want to go forever and never want to stop being there. So how did you get into title?
This was actually a by chance thing. My mom's next door neighbor had a opening for a receptionist position. Okay. And so I did not know anything about title.
Right.
And accepted the position. It's going to be a temporary job.
Right. They always are.
And started the receptionist position. I ended up really, really very interested in the title. Okay. And so stayed in the receptionist position for about 3 or 4 years, moved up to an assistant, and then was an assistant for several years to 2 different closers, and then I've been closing for a little over 7 years now.
Right. But this is your office now.
This is my office,
correct?
Yes.
So we went from running the receptionist desk to running the entire office.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's a big jump. I mean, especially, I always like to point out to people whenever we have conversations like this that, when you look at individuals, whether you call them motivations or skill sets or whatever the case may be, just because you start off as a receptionist working a computer and a desk and taking appointments or whatever, if you have the drive, if you have the intelligence and the wherewithal and the want to, it's not very difficult to move your way up through things, right?
No, it's not. And I've been in the business of total for about 15 years. Yeah. I wanted it really bad though. Yeah. Like I was really interested in everything and I wanted to learn more and
What was it specifically that really kind of sparked your desire to want to do it?
You know what was originally when I first came in, I had never worked with an office full of women before and I was terrified. Okay. And I was like, oh my God, women hate each other.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've heard that before. As a man, I'm gonna choose not to comment on that particular subject, but safe. I'll take your word for it because I think you might be right. I don't know, maybe.
So I walked into this office with these women and I just fell in love with them. Yeah. And everybody cared about each other so much. And it made me want to stay there. It made me want to do well for them. And then I just kind of was like, you know, questions would be asked and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, I want to know more about that or whatever. And when the position came available to be an assistant, I mean, I was ready.
So it was really, what you're saying kind of is that it was less about the title work itself, like what you do on a day-to-day basis, and way more about the culture and the people that you were surrounded with that made it more appealing, right?
It's funny because when I first started, I thought I wanted to go on the marketing side.
Right.
And I thought I wanted to be a marketer and do all that stuff. I would be terrible at that.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. That's not certainly what you want to do.
God definitely blessed me with that.
He made sure that you didn't go down the wrong path.
No,
right?
honey, that's wrong for you.
Right. Well, okay, so you've been here in Mansfield now at this office for how long?
We've been in this particular office. It'll be 2 years in April.
Okay.
But we were at the other office for 2.5 years. It was like right down the street.
287. Yeah. So in Mansfield as a whole for almost 5 years, or give or take.
Almost, yeah, about 4. Almost 4.
And so these days, you know, the last 5 years in the market in general, for all of our agents that are watching this and know this, has been insane.
Yes.
Right? It's been crazy. And you know, you start when you're really, really busy, you examine, or you don't have time, I should say, to examine every facet of your business, because whether it's you're a lender or an agent or a title company and business is just flying at you like it has been, you don't always have to be the best at everything, right? And
so you have good teamwork.
Yes. And so, you know, but when things start to slow down and the market starts to shift and you get to times of the year, like right now, we're here in December, or I guess we're not quite in December yet. We're almost there.
Yeah.
Then you start kind of setting back and going, okay, like I really need to evaluate the partners I work with, who I do business with, because it impacts your client's perception of the entire process, right?
Yep.
And so one of the things that I always tell agents when I talk to them about picking partners to work with is it's not so much, you know, I think people get lost in, you know, how many times you go to lunch, or, you know, what gift basket you gave out that particular day, or, you know, if someone's offering you a bottle of water when you walk in the door, which all that stuff is fine.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think it tends to be more important about what is the person that you're working with, how are they going to execute the process, and what is their level of communication and interaction with you when you're not working on a deal. Right. So one of the things that I've always loved about Tiffanie is that, you know, she doesn't get a loan from us every single month, you know, well, lately maybe a little bit, but typically speaking, it's intermittent. It just depends on how things go. But anytime I need something and anytime I have a question, I don't ever doubt the first person I'm going to call is you, especially when it's related to anything, you know, title related. So speak to, or I want you to talk about, you know, when you're looking at title partners and or just what you guys do in particular, like what are some things that you think that as a company that you guys do really well that sets you above everybody else?
I'm always going to say this, no matter what, anytime this question ever gets asked to me, it is communication. Right. I feel like communication is the make or break in this business. Right. Because, you know, you have files, and this is a stressful business no matter what anyway.
It's an emotional business. People are buying a house. It's a big deal.
I've been in my house for 5 years, and you know, they say the average person now moves 3 to 5 years. I still have PTSD 5 years later from buying and selling. And when I'm in closings and people are doing it, I always say, everything's gonna be okay. And then when it happened to me, I was like, I hate this. And so you're more sympathetic to it. Right. But if you just start, when there's an issue, if you just start ghosting and start not communicating or, you know, not answering, it makes people really, really wonky. Right. And so it's the oldest trick in the book. Right. And it's like, we know you're not answering us because there's an issue. You know, let's move forward.
Well, and I think a lot of times too, I don't know if, you know, agents experience this very much. And again, this is something that you guys do great is, you know, most of the business that you get comes from listing agents, right? Somebody lists their house. They typically in Texas get to choose who the title company is going to be.
Correct.
That's pretty customary, right?
Correct.
But there's also a whole other side of the transaction, which are buyer's agents.
Correct.
And often, not all the time, but often, your listing agents are a little bit more seasoned most of the time because they've been doing it a while and they've built up a business and get listings. And some of your buyer agents are a little newer.
Yes.
And they maybe don't have as much experience. Now, obviously, there's a mix of that. It's not
sure.
But just in general. So speak to a little bit about, when you're communicating with agents and the importance of the buyer and the seller and not leaving the buyer's agent out to twist in the wind and circumstances that come up, which is important while you get in touch with them.
I feel like there's more ins and outs to the buyer side than there is the listing side in a transaction, because there's more steps that are involved as far as depositing earnest money, inspections, appraisals, clear to close, pre-clear, like all that, getting the CD balance, funds, stuff like that. And so, especially if you have a newer agent, you're going to have to, be more straightforward on what the process looks like. Because sometimes they'll ask questions like, hey, did the appraisal come in? And, we as a title company don't ever see the appraisal, or the listing agent does not see the appraisal. And so you kind of have to help, coach them with things like that. When I get a contract in, whether it's whoever my directed business is, I'm always, my end goal is, how can I get this other agent to not necessarily want to send me business, but respect respect the office and respect our transaction. And so in order to do that, you have to treat them, whether it's a $5,000 file or a $5 million file, you have to treat everybody the same way.
Yes.
And so that's what, I think we do a really good job about that here.
Well, and goes to what we were talking about a minute ago about picking partners, just in that people that you work with, whoever they may be, is when you have a question or you have a need, because being an agent, especially being a new agent, is, I call it's a low barrier to entry job, which just basically means, if you can go take a test and you can pass that test and study, which, by the way, all the stuff on the test has nothing to do with your job, or at least very little. But then you're just kind of thrown to the wolves, right? Yes. You're just kind of tossed out there and said, okay, go figure it out. And there's great brokerages and great brokers to work for that will help and hold your hand. And that some people have mentors and all kinds of stuff like that. But even in those worlds, they don't know everything there is to know about every facet of the business, and that's why, whether it's a lender or an insurance person or a roofer or a title company, you have to have people that aren't just there to service you when you give them business, but are there to service you when you don't have business, right?
Correct. Yes. And, even though I've been in the business for 15 years, there are still things that stump me all the time. But luckily, I have the surroundings around me, like attorneys, examiners, people that I can go to, because I don't claim to know all the answers to everything. But I'm always like, okay, I don't know the answer. Let me get back to you on this.
Well, and I think depending on your point of view, I think that gets lost on people sometimes, because my personal opinion, we actually talked about this in a video I did last week, is that I would much rather call somebody and ask them a question, and occasionally they go, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. Let me find out, right? Because I think so many people want to be right, or right's not the wrong word, the right word. They just want to be there right there to give you an answer.
Yeah.
And it's the easy way.
Or do you feel like they say, I don't know, and then they're done?
Well, there can be that, but more often than not, when I find people that say they don't know, usually they're going to say, but let me find out. Right? Now, if someone just says, I don't know, you have to call somebody else. Well, okay, it's a little different. But more often than not, like you, if I call you and say, hey, here's a situation, what do you think about this? Then you're going to go, you know what? I don't know. Give me 30 minutes or give me an hour or whatever, and I'll call you back. And the great thing about what you do is that you call me back and you give me the answer. And then at that point, I know that it's the right answer. It infuriates me a lot of times as a lender when I call a title company or have a question for them. And even though, like, a lot of times I would call kind of knowing the answer.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Right? You just need some reassurance.
I just need a little validation.
I do that all the time.
Right. I just need a little bit of validation that I was on the right track. Right. Not right, but just on the right track. And you'll talk to somebody and they'll go, oh no, this. And you're like, are you sure? Like, because I've heard that you can do it this way. And they're like, no. It's only like this. And you're like,
the one thing that I've learned in title, and the quicker you learn it, the better off you'll be. There's a lot of gray.
A lot.
There's a
Yes.
lot of gray.
Yes.
And so just because you did it this way doesn't mean you can't do it that way.
No. And that's the importance of, again, having a partner that you can call and talk to and get a real answer, and not just what they've always been told. Right? Because we suffer that same thing in my business all the time, and it drives me crazy, where we'll have an underwriter or somebody that is making a decision on a file, and it comes out and says, okay, you can't do this. I'm like, but I think
But
you
hang
can.
on a second.
Right, I think we can. Like, if I think I can do it this way and do it this way, and you're not trying to argue, you're just trying to get clarification, right? But they're like, well, this is how it is, and this is what's. And then you find out, whether you went down that road and really got the answer, or you took their word for it and said, okay, well, you're the authority, so I'm going to agree with what you say, right? And just go with that. And then you find out 30 days later, or a month later, or 2 months later, oh no, actually, you can do that. It just makes you insane, right? So how often, when you're talking with agents and when you're talking with clients coming in, do you come across it a lot where situations pop up that there's like, well, we can't do that, and you're like, well, actually, you kind of can. And how do you tread that water to make sure you're not?
It's funny because there's different, like, we have our underwriters on our side, and I know you have your underwriters on your side, and so normally if I'm able to talk to like the closer or whatever, then there's more, they're able to push that through, and we're able to get through it. But if someone gives you a hard answer and says, we're absolutely not doing this, I don't fight a whole lot, just because.
Well, you're in a bad situation because you're in the middle. And if you push back, you're going to have somebody upset at you one way or another. And we're all in the business of relationships, and we're all trying to make sure that everybody's happy, right? That's isn't that the goal at the end of the day? Like, we're sitting in her closing office right now, and the goal for every lender and every realtor and every title company is that when the buyers sit here and they sign everything with the sellers, that they walk out with a big smile on their face, right?
Yes.
And if you're telling somebody that their lender was wrong or their agent was wrong or something like that, that's not going to go wrong.
No. You can never go in the closing room and start bashing everybody.
Right.
You can't do it.
But that happens.
It's too late.
But that happens a lot.
We're here.
Right, but
We're
that does
here.
happen. Don't you think?
I think
Not
so.
here. That's why, again, why I love you. But it happens, because people just decide they want to share their opinions on stuff a lot.
Yeah, and it's not the time or the place.
No, especially when you have two people, or a buyer or seller or whatever, that they're super excited about their new home, or they've been through this entire stressful process, and now here you are at the end.
Well, but as also, think about it in your perspective. So say an agent of yours has a buyer, and you talk to the buyer, and the buyer decides to go to Wells Fargo,
right?
Because of whatever reason,
Right.
We inevitably know that transaction's probably not going to go well.
Right.
But when you're in the closing
Thanks
table,
for saying that, by the way. Don't go to Wells Fargo.
You can't go in the closing table and be back. Well, if you would have used Mike Mills, then none of this would have happened.
Right.
Doesn't
serve anybody any purpose, a good purpose to do that.
It does not.
Hey, buyer, by the way, you made a dumb decision.
Exactly.
Oh, that's going to go over real well.
You wanted to close 12 days late? Well, I can tell you why.
Right. But again, unfortunately, that does occur.
It does.
And a lot of times, it happens in the closing room, because people's emotions are high and they're upset about something, and some overzealous closer decides to share their opinion on how the transaction went, and everybody walks out with a bad taste in their mouth, and that's certainly not what we want.
No.
Right? And again, to keep tooting your horn, because you don't do it yourself very often, this is one of the things about your office and your team that I appreciate so much, is that there's nothing but positivity that comes from this room, or comes from you dealing with clients all the time. I've never had anybody, which has occurred in other places, say, oh, well, this person said this or this person did that, because it always is, hey, this is awesome, this is great, this is good for you, you made a good decision. And people want to be reinforced in what they did, right? They want to feel better about their decisions.
When we walk in the closing room, or when I walk in the closing room, this is the easy part.
Right.
It's that actually is the fun part.
Right.
All the work's been done, and when you're behind your computer, and then your heckles are up because you're waiting on docs, waiting on this, waiting on clear to close. But when you walk in here, it's like everything's done.
Right.
And you have to reassure them that.
So speaking of the work and getting everything completed, for any new agents out there that are like, okay, well, I just need to pick a title company, whoever it is I decide to use, what explain to people, like, what do you do? Like, what do you actually do on a day-to-day basis involving a contract and a transaction? From you get an agent that's, you have somebody that you're working with, they send you a deal. At that point, what is your role from start to finish?
Okay. So contract comes in and we turn it in, which is basically what we're talking about, opening up title work. Earnest money gets deposited, and then while we wait for the title work to come in, we reach out to the lender, and then they get communication with them, and then title work comes in. At that time, that's when you see what's going on with the title.
Now, let me back you up real quick. Okay, so you glossed over a part that seems to be a big problem often, where you talk about earnest money and money coming in, right? So speak to a little bit of that, just as far as what you used to have to do, the great thing about what you can do now, and how much of a, let's call it a challenge sometimes it can be to get that money actually delivered, and why it's so important.
Okay, so the earnest and option money gets delivered with the contract. You have 3 days. You have 3 days. Holidays and weekends do not count as those 3 days. So you have 3 days from the executed date minus holidays and weekends. Okay. We have several different options that you can turn in the earnest money. You can, if you want to come by and say hello to us, drop off a check, we'd love to have you. There's a little area out there that says upon request you can get wine and beer and all kinds of fun stuff. So drop it off and grab yourself a little Chardonnay on the way out the door. Absolutely. I actually have had people do that before. Oh yeah, I was sure. So that gets turned in, and then so you can drop it in, or we have an app called Zocam. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Yes. And it's basically an app that you take a picture of the check and it goes directly into our bank account. And that's how, and then we send a receipted page from that. We also have wiring instructions, so you can wire them, go to your bank. I think a lot of times now that COVID's happening, you can do that on your computer. Right. So send that in, or we can provide a FedEx label if your buyer is out of state and doesn't feel comfortable doing any of the technology thing. And you know what? That's fine. Yeah. And they can get the FedEx label, walk over to the FedEx, put it in, and send it to us, and so we'll get the next day. And again, I think most agents probably know this, but just so we're clear, what happens if you don't get the money in 3 days? It terminates. The contract terminates. Right. So that first 3 days, there's a lot of communication between agents and title companies because we got to get the money in. When's it coming in? You said it was coming in yesterday. We haven't got the FedEx yet, right? Now, if you if someone's sending it from, say, Minnesota, and does like the day they mail it, does that count, or do you actually have to have it in hand? You're technically supposed to have a receipted page by your 3rd day. Gotcha. So you need the money in hand. So get your earnest money in. If you're in Minnesota, it might be a good idea to wire or do Zocam. Yes. I'm just saying. Yes. It's a little bit better. You may have to hold someone's hand to show them exactly how to use the technology. Okay, so earnest money comes in. You've got an executed contract now. And how often would you say that you have to reach out to us lenders and be like, hey, send us your title work? Or how often do we send it on our own? Or I should say the request is really what we're looking for here. And you can be honest. It's okay. Okay. You know what? This is funny that we're actually on this subject. Okay. Because I have noticed in the past, probably, I would say COVID. Since COVID. Okay. Since all of this business has been ramped up, most of the time now, the day I get the contract, I get a commitment request in. Really? Okay. And it did not used to be like that. Wow. Well, that's good then. It is. It's never been like that. Right. So you're getting them pretty fast now. Really fast now. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. So order comes in, you're placing your title request. So what does that mean? Like when you're ordering title, what does that mean? So the title work is based on, the order of the title work is based on what the contract has. Okay. So you have your buyer name, your seller name, and your legal description. Legal description is very important on the contract because that's what basically does the title search. Okay. And so the title work comes in, and at that point, we verify all the information that's on the title commitment. So we make sure that the vesting, which is the seller, matches what's on the contract. We make sure any buyer's names are on there correctly. If we have a survey before the contract, we're able to look at the title work with the survey and show that either the survey is approved or it's rejected for whatever reason. along with the T47 if there's been any improvements.
So is it important? So you're talking about names, legal addresses, surveys. On
T47.
Okay, on the names, if my name's, Mike, but my legal first name is Richard, right? My Richard Mike Mills, it's not, but let's say it was.
Right.
The contract really needs to say Richard.
It does need to say Richard.
Right, and not, so that's something as agents you need to make sure when you're filling out these contracts to make sure that, because I ask this question as a lender, my question to them is always, what is your legal first name? What is your legal name? What's on your tax returns?
Right.
That's what I need to find out.
And if for whatever reason it gets missed,
right,
you can always do an amendment to the contract,
right,
and put in there other modifications and change the name.
And the legal description is extremely important.
Very important. Because
I'm sure you get a lot of contracts that are missing.
You know what? I actually don't.
Okay, good.
I actually don't.
That's good. That's good.
So that gets turned in, and then, like I said, if the survey and T47 are in, we review all that.
What's a T47?
The T47 is the document that goes with the survey.
Okay.
That basically states that from the time the survey was done, there have been no major changes made to the survey. So that would mean, has there been a pool added? Okay. Has there been any kind of deck added? Right. Has there been a fence that has been moved that would possibly affect the property line?
Okay.
Things of that nature. If there have been improvements, then we need to review those to see if we're going to accept the survey.
Gotcha. So you guys decide, you get a copy of the survey, assuming that they have one. And if you don't, you got to get a new one. And then you're ensuring essentially that there's been no significant changes, which is needed for the lender because we have to have that to make sure that
that T47 has to get notarized.
Right. Okay. So, and then the T47 is basically for lack of a better word, your insurance policy to say, hey, this survey's good, that nothing's changed on this property, it's in good shape.
Yes, and we're relying on the sellers to provide us with the correct information so we can move forward with insuring on the survey and issue you your survey endorsements as well.
Okay, so we have the survey now, we have the title work ordered.
Yes.
Now, at that point, you've got the money, you've got earnest and option, title work's been ordered, you've approved or disapproved the survey, whatever the case may be. Now we're kind of in that waiting period, right? How long does it usually take to actually get title work back? Typically.
Normally it takes about 3 to 5 days.
3 to 5 business days.
Right. To get in. So anything that is like acreage or out of county, I feel like the further out you go, the slower things come back.
What could you possibly mean? Well, I don't understand.
We're doing it wrong.
Are we? Yeah. Well, we are.
Are constantly hustling and bustling, and they're just
like, we'll do it when we do it.
And I want to be frustrated, but I'm also jealous.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive they pull that off. Well, it's funny, whenever you deal with buyers that live in, say, DFW, right? Yes. And then they're buying, say, a lake property on like Whitney or something like that. And you're having to deal with a title company there and this appraiser's there. And, at this point, anytime I get a property that's outside of like the city limits, I'm like, look, guys.
Look, we cannot have a 21-day closing.
I'm just letting you know
I'm just setting all expectations up front.
It's going to take a little bit longer because, Mary Beth in, so title is going to take a little time.
I have also appraisers in Johnson County that consider that out of their spectrum also. And I mean, not like Burleson or, part of Mansfield or anything, but if you go like a little further out in Johnson County, it's,
All right, so title work comes in.
Title work comes in.
Now you have a job to do, which is what?
We look over the title work. So at that time, that's where we are able to see if there's any title issues on the file.
Right.
So, like I said, we look over vesting, which is seller's name, survey, T47 issues, and then there is your commitment is in 4 parts: Schedule A, B, C, and D.
Now, can you? This is probably a dumb question, but you can order title without a request from a lender, right?
Absolutely. Okay. The contract does that.
Right. That's what the contract does. So just because the lender didn't send you a specific request, more often than not, you're probably ordering it anyway.
It's already been ordered as soon as the contract gets turned in.
And that's really important because you don't know what you're going to get until it comes back, right?
Right.
So if you've got, somebody's got a crazy uncle that's making a claim, or there's a tax lien, or, vendors, or what do they call it? Is it vendor's lien? Vendor's lien? So tell us about a couple of those different types of liens that you can find.
So you have your basic lien on there that is your mortgage.
Right.
So that is it's always going to show up. So if your seller has a mortgage on the property, it's going to show up in your Schedule C as a vendor's lien on there, and it'll have whatever the deed of trust date is, which is the mortgage when they purchase the property, and that information will be on there. Okay. So then after that, we'll have any kind of what we like to call additional requirements. So if the property is in an LLC, it'll have a requirement that we want to see any kind of LLC documents that we have to approve, because we have to do that to insure also.
Gotcha.
If there's any abstracts of judgments, that will show on there.
That's bad. Judgments are bad.
So, but judgments are not always scary, because what happens is when we open up title work, we do a name search. So say your name's Tiffanie Williams. Okay. There's lots of Tiffanie Williams around here.
There's a few.
Yeah. So Tiffanie Williams there's gotta be a Tiffanie Williams out there that's not paying her bills.
Right.
You know?
Well, sure. I mean,
yeah. So, so that comes in, and just because it's on there doesn't necessarily mean it is your seller.
Right.
So we clear that up with information. We have an information sheet that we send out that has all of their pertinent information. Social, data.
Hold on, I want to stop you real quick. So has this happened that you're aware of? Because I've experienced this to some extent, where title company will say, hey, we've got a lien for blah, 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 you know, and a lot of times they'll say, but we're checking it out or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then somehow that internal information gets communicated to the buyer or the seller, and people start freaking out because like, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. You're like, no. Like, we're saying it probably isn't you, but we have to clear it and make sure.
So we like to send out the title work to the buyers and sellers and agents after we clear things up.
Right.
But if there is just someone that's absolutely saying, I need this for this reason or that reason, we kind of say, here it is, but we're still clearing this up. So here you go. And they might need it for, deed restrictions or things that they're building something out there. So they need it within that time frame.
Yeah.
So
you've never had any panicked buyers?
Oh, all the time. All the time. And my favorite is, this is for information purposes only. You do not need to do anything with this. Right. Do I sign this?
Right. No, it says.
You don't have to sign it. It's just for your information purpose only.
And that's really the crux of a lot of what you guys are doing is once, the title works back, because up until that point, we're talking about tasks, right? We're receiving earnest money, we're ordering title, we're checking the survey. But now once the title work's actually in, that's where your expertise comes into play to say, okay, this is okay, this is not okay, we need to get this cleared. I mean, it's kind of like detective work.
Yes, right? Yeah, absolutely.
You're examining all facets of it to make sure it's good, because ultimately, the lender is going to make sure, or needs to be sure, that the property that they're issuing this money for is insurable to some extent, right?
Right, absolutely.
Now, can you talk a little bit about, from a fee side, right? Everybody wants to talk about fees, right? And I don't want to get into the minutia of specific fees, but can you explain to people about title insurance itself and how that's determined on what the cost is?
Yes. So
buyer and seller.
The buyer and seller. So everything is pertinent to what the contract says. Right. So depending on who pays for what per the contract is who gets charged on there. Your owner's title policy. So there's two different fees. You have your owner's policy and your lender's policy. Right. So the state of Texas is considered a simultaneous state. Okay. So if you purchase an owner's policy, you get a lender's policy for $100. Okay. The owner's policy is based on the sales price. Okay. And so it's regulated by the state of Texas.
So you don't determine that?
No, we are not able to determine that. Every title company in the state of Texas has the same fees on their endorsements, things like that. Right. So if they opt to not have an owner's policy, one, I can't close it. Right. Has to go to another office. Right. But two, the buyer would end up paying for the policy based on what their loan amount is. Right. So most of the time when you have a sales price, their loan amount is significantly close to the sales price.
Yeah, it's like a little less than 1%.
Yes. So they would be paying for outright for that amount in there.
Right. Now, why is there a difference sometimes? Because there's this idea, I think a lot of agents have and buyers have, that, well, I don't have to close the title company that the seller picks, right?
Right.
Because they don't have to.
They don't have to.
But what's the incentive that makes sure that very rarely happens?
So I have had enough agents that have had horror stories at other title companies that some of them are just really good at negotiating things and bringing it in. Yeah. And they're like, so this is why I trust my title company. Right. If you'll just give them a chance, I promise they'll win you over as well. And so I think it starts at the beginning of the transaction when before I'm even able to step in.
Right.
So it's all in the negotiation part.
Well, but I'm kind of more referring to when you talk about cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm a buyer, okay, the owner's policy, if the seller's paying it, right, then they're covered. Mm-hmm. The lender's policy as the buyer, I typically have to pay.
Right.
So why wouldn't I just go close where I want to close?
Well, because you're not closing with me.
But there is a discount.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
For if you close at the same place, right? If an owner's policy and the lender's policy, is that true? Or?
No. So I think you're thinking about your discount on your policies is when you're doing a refinance.
Okay.
Are you talking about the R8 credit?
No. I'm talking about, so it was my understanding that and maybe I'm wrong, where if I want to close, if I'm an agent, right, and I'm going to take my buyer to Tiffanie at Fair Texas, right, and they're going to sign here, and the seller is paying the title policy. Okay. Well, my buyer, for whatever reason, decided that they want to close at some other place, okay? But I was under the understanding that the lender's policy gets discounted because you're closing at the same place. Because if you decide to go close at a separate title company, you're closing at two different title companies. Now that lender's policy is no longer discounted and you're paying the full premium. Is that false?
No, that's false.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you could choose to go close somewhere else and still pay the same.
Your policy fees are regulated by the state of Texas.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So
and it's based on your sales price, and then if you decide to opt out to not do a title policy, it's based on your loan amount.
Okay, so I learn something new every day.
So I was very confused there for a second.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying, because I was always under the impression that the buyer they always had the choice to close somewhere else. They didn't have to close where the seller chose, but the incentive was to close where the seller's closing because they get a cheaper lender's policy than if they were to go close somewhere else.
Yeah, so their simultaneous lender policy is always going to be $100.
Okay, and that's just I know about the R8 credits on refinance.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're getting in the weeds a little bit. But, all right. So I'm screwed up and don't understand fees, which is why
it's okay.
I'm talking
We'll talk
to you.
later. We'll talk
Right.
later.
So you explain all this to me. Okay. So now you've got the title work in. You've examined everything. Everything looks good.
Yes.
You're all passed off to the lender. Now you're basically waiting on the lender.
Right.
Right.
And then stuff like you're waiting on the appraisal. You're waiting on it to go into underwriting. Things like that.
So let me ask you, when it comes to scheduling someone to close, right? This is a problem that we run into as lenders from time to time. Okay. Where we're like, hey, we're going to close on whatever, Friday. Okay. And then the response might be, well,
I'm going out of town?
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a lot. No, from the title company might be, well, are you clear to close yet? And we're like, well, no, but we'll be clear to close by Wednesday. So we don't schedule anybody until we're clear to close. Or, I've run into those policies before too. What are your thoughts on that? I
am just a go with the flow person.
Yes.
So if somebody is like, I have to have this particular time because of I'm picking my kids up for school, I have a commute or whatever, let's do it.
Yes.
Let's absolutely put you down. But I set expectations and I have boundaries.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm like, I can absolutely do this if you want this 8:30 morning appointment. I just know that we have to have stuff by the lender by X amount this time. And if not, let's go to plan B.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things, again, I appreciate so much about you is, and I don't want to throw this out for everybody, but, because this isn't a regular thing, but at the same time, you guys, one of my biggest frustrations sometimes with title companies is, somebody will call from my office at 4:45 and you're not getting anybody. Everybody's gone.
Yeah.
And you guys are always available. You're always here. You sign people, after 6 o'clock a lot. It's not ideal, but it does happen because, buyers and sellers, they work and they have jobs and, they have responsibilities and things. And so they can't always close at noon in the middle of the day. Right. Now, on that same topic, I think there's a misconception about how long it actually takes to close.
Yes.
So can you talk about that?
So normally what they want to say is your average seller takes about 30 minutes and your average buyer takes about an hour.
Okay.
So I don't take that long.
Let's go. Let's go.
Hurry up, sign it.
Right.
Normally a seller takes me about 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And buyers, now these buyers are doing these slim packages now,
Yep.
which are amazing.
Yes.
And so they do half of the stuff online before they come in.
And you're
then
signing
there's
like
a
10
tiny
pieces.
package
Yep.
and you're out in 25 minutes.
Yes.
And so if somebody will call me or if an agent will let me know, hey, my people are on a strict schedule or whatever, well, it's fine, we'll get them in and out or whatever. I mean, I still want to explain everything to them,
Sure.
but sometimes if it's their 6th or 7th house, they know to file their homestead exemption.
Yeah.
They know when their first payment's going to be due. So.
Well, every house we've ever closed with Tiffany, which has been a couple, I think it took us about 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes to get it all through because we were just like, yeah, whatever. Well, and here's the thing too, I don't know that everybody understands, we joke about this privately a lot, but when someone has a question, not a question, when someone has a concern about a particular document that they're signing at closing, I don't feel comfortable signing this for whatever reason, right? Unfortunately, our business is highly regulated. And the answer to the question of, do I have to sign this document is,
yes, you have to sign it.
Yes, you do. Because if you don't,
or no, you don't have to sign it, but that's okay. We just can't close on the house.
Right. I think realtors run into this problem as well. Not all the time, but from time to time, because you have people that are real detailed and want to make sure everything's is perfect, and that's why we're like, I can't imagine going in and signing on a $400,000 house and not going through every single piece of paper and making sure that I agree with it.
Yeah.
And I get that, right? That's not necessarily unreasonable. It's just that there isn't much you're going to be able to change, if anything, at all.
Well, and I find that when I have people that are kind of like that, and they walk in the closing room and they kind of have their heckles up a little, so I take the time to explain the document, and then I hand it over, and they read it, and then they go, that's what she said.
Right.
And so we move on to the next one. And when we're about a fourth of the way done, they trust me.
Right.
And so they're like, okay, we're fine. We're fine.
Yeah, and like I said, I think agents run into the same problem too, because like with the real estate contracts, right? You'll have guys that used to be attorneys or whatever. They're trying to cross stuff out.
You can't cross stuff out.
It's like you can't do that.
Stuff out.
There's a reason it's so regulated. So, so now the day of closing happens, right?
We skipped out on the disclosures and things like that.
Okay, please.
So after we wait for all the appraisals and underwriting, and we get the clear to close and stuff, you send us a CD to work out. And so that's basically closing disclosure CD.
Yes.
Also. So we work that up, and that's how we get our final figures.
Right.
So we plug in our seller's figures, which is payoffs, commissions, things like that. And then we plug in your side, which is all of your buyer's fees.
Right.
And then we match those figures, and that's what we walk into the closing room with.
Correct. And as a lender, again, I keep talking about how awesome you guys are. I appreciate y'all so much because, sometimes we're not always moving at the greatest speed, and sometimes we are, it just depends on the circumstances. But we have a lot of occasions where we'll send a closing disclosure or CD in the morning to balance. We're trying to get fees lined up and make sure everybody's on the same page. And then we don't hear from anybody, until the end of the day. Or you guys are trying to get a hold of us and like, hey, we're closing in 2 days when you get the CD lined out, right? And it becomes a bit of a back and forth, especially at the end, because we're trying to get numbers to the buyer to make sure that they can get their check and get their money lined up for what they need. And you guys need to make sure that you have it all lined out and ready to go, so you know what you should be getting.
But I think that also goes back to working with that's why you keep your sphere in, because I know if I have to file with you. And I text you or call you or email you and I say, hey, are we looking good for closing date? And you say yes, I don't need to worry about it anymore.
Right.
Because if you say yes, if it's going to be no, you're going to let me know.
Right.
And so that's you can just take that off your task list. Done. You don't have, because other lenders that you don't normally work with, you check in and they're like, oh, we'll have it to you tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and they're like, hey, just checking in on this again. And sometimes you might not have an answer.
So what would you say, I'm glad you said that, what would you say to a new agent that was like, my buyer decided they're going to use whatever bank, right? Or whatever insurance company, or whatever, right? And I don't really want to pressure them into doing anything. I want them to make their own decision, which is fine, right? But what are some of the downsides of that sometimes?
I would say if it's your buyer's preferred lender,
sure,
and you reach out to them and you can't get a hold of them,
right,
and then you get a contract accepted, and because that's a big deal nowadays for a buyer's agent to get a contract accepted. And, a lot of these listing agents want to vet these lenders. And if they can't get a hold of them, chances are you're going to have trouble in paradise almost the whole entire transaction.
Right. Well, and I think, kind of what I was getting to a little bit is, you were talking about keeping everything in your sphere. And, the importance of that is that the whole purpose of every transaction, whether you realize it or not, is to get more transactions, right? Right. So, everybody gets thrilled, we got under contract, whatever, and we're ready to go, and now it's time to take a vacation. And that's really not the case, because when you get under contract, that is one step closer to you getting to closing and having a happy buyer so you can get another contract and get another deal.
And not necessarily, like I said earlier, I don't want to close every agent in the whole entire Metroplex, but I want them to think that we did a good job.
Correct. Well, and that's where when you start deciding on partners to use and whether or not you're choosing to maybe make a soft recommendation to your buyer or seller or whoever, what title company or whatever to use, the importance of that is that if you've worked with those people, if you've worked with them and everything's gone well and you've never had problems and everything's gone smooth, then you have an expectation that it's going to finish and be the same result, right? Yeah. And when you start throwing wild cards into, the mix, a different lender that you're not used to work with, a different title company that you're not usually working with, some inspector that you never worked with, and those people start getting involved in your transaction, you may close it, right? You may get the deal done, everything may be fine, but there also may be a lot of bumps and bruises along the way because nobody's worked with anybody else before, and your buyers feel that, and your sellers feel that, and then when the buyer or seller then goes and sits down with mom and has breakfast or lunch or whatever after they've closed, and they're stressed because this person said this and this person said that, when they go, how did it go? The answer isn't, well, it was amazing, Tiffanie was awesome, and Mike did great. The answer is, well, it took a couple hours to get the docs over. We sat at the title company for 45 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yes. I will never have anybody sit here waiting for docs, though.
Right.
I do have a boundary with that.
Yeah.
So
it's like
I'm pretty laid back, but I don't want anybody sitting in my lobby.
Well, and the smoother the transaction goes, and the better it is. Again, the more likely those referrals are going to come back to you, the more likely you're going to be able to get more business because everybody had a good experience. Right. And that's why it's so important. It's not because you want to send business to your best friend or whatever. It's because it's imperative that you make the contract and the entire process be as seamless and painless as possible. Right. Because then they recommend you to other people. Right. Right.
I have, throughout the years closing, I have been able to acquire several agents that were on the other side of the transaction, just from the way that my team and I handled it, and they were like, I really liked working with you. I'm working in the area, and they ended up sending us contracts again.
Yeah. So just do a good job. Do your best every single time, and business happens. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're signing. You've then done your what were we just talking about? The closing disclosure. We've balanced all the fees. Everything's loaded.
It's clear close.
Buyers got their stuff. People come in to sign. It doesn't take 2 hours. No. It can be done in 15 minutes.
If you do a slim package with Mike, 25 minutes.
That's right. It's quick and easy. And then once you're finished signing, what are we waiting on at that point?
So once all parties have to get done signing, and then we send those documents that the lender has, we send them over back to y'all. Yep. And then at that time, you review everything, make sure they signed everything correctly, and then they issue us what's called a funding number. Right. So we have to have two things. We have to have the funding number, and we have to have funds. Right. So they order us the wire for whatever the loan amount is. Okay. I get that in. I have the funding number. We then disperse everything. Right. And what I mean by disperse is buyer obtains ownership of the home, seller receives their proceeds, we pay off their mortgage, we pay the commissions, everything gets cut.
All the money gets sent out to everybody.
Correct.
So you're the intermediary that's holding the money and distributing it out.
Correct.
Now, if someone were to say to you, well, Tiffanie, how do I know that you guys are going to pay everybody the way they should be? Like if I'm paying off a credit card at closing, and I'm paying off my car, like how do I know that they're going to send that money? How does the buyer know that?
I've actually never had anybody
Well,
ask me
let me
that
ask you
before.
this and put it a different way. At the end of every day, don't you have to kind of balance everything out?
Oh, yeah.
And make sure that you don't have any extra cash just laying around?
No.
So part of your job and your responsibility is that you handle all the money, right? So that way, if I were to give earnest money to a seller directly, right, and they were to have that cash, and then I change my mind, it's gonna be really hard to get that money back, in some cases, right?
When I'm in closing though, when I'm going over the statements and there are fees on there, like, for the lender, you have to collect 1 year of homeowner's insurance. And so I always say, we're going to pay that directly. That check's going to go directly to them. And if there is a credit card bill in there, we'll pay that directly. So
your account won't let you have extra funds at the end of the day. You can't do that. So title company's not keeping any money.
Regulated by the state.
They want to get rid of it. They're like, I don't want this. Take it.
Yes.
Especially when you get calls later on and says, well, our insurance wasn't paid or this didn't happen. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure it was. It's just a matter of maybe it went to the wrong place. Maybe the lender gave the wrong
information. And I also find that a lot of times now, because of COVID, not everyone's going in the office. And so sometimes the check could sit on somebody's desk for a certain amount of time. And so it's like, hey, can you go look for the check? Oh, found it. So I've had that happen several times.
So, all right. So now we've got everything's closed and funded. Buyers are happy. Everybody's got their keys. We're all thrilled and ready to celebrate because we own a new home.
Yes.
So that's a typical real estate transaction for most people.
Yes.
Right?
So then it continues on with us.
Okay.
So at that point, we issue what's called the mortgage policy and the owner's policy.
Oh, yes. I actually just got something in the mail from you the other day. Thank you very much. I was like, what? Oh, yeah, okay.
So that is what your insurance policy is. So that comes about 30 to 60 days after closing. And when you get that in, that's basically your insurance policy. So if you ever go to sell your home as a buyer and there is a issue on your commitment that like say there's a lien that pops up and you're like, well, this wasn't, on there whenever I closed, you basically can send it over the policy and that is able to get rid of any clouds that are on title. Because when we came in, we insured clear title, and we're saying that from the time you purchase the home to everything back, you're clear.
Gotcha.
So, but if you have a mechanic's lien because you didn't pay your roofer, then we can't help you with that.
Gotta pay the roofer.
You have to pay the roofer.
Can't not pay the roofer.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are some things that if the general person were to say, well, what else do you guys do when you're not doing purchase and refinance transactions? What other services do you guys offer that people don't use very much or know very much about?
We teach classes.
Okay.
So we have CE credit classes. Different kinds of topics that we have. We do legal 1 and 2, the extra boring one.
Yeah.
We have one, actually it's a fun one, it's called Jeopardy. And so it's basically like your Q&As of title and real estate in Jeopardy version. And so then we'll have like our underwriters come in and teach classes and things like that.
What about to like a general consumer, somebody that's like, I'm assuming y'all do like deed switches and like, do you have a lot of real estate investors that buy properties? And we had talked one time about moving stuff in and out of LLCs and all that kind of stuff. What's that?
We can definitely service that. So say you bought a property and you got it in your individual name and then it's going to be a rental property, but for whatever reason your lender wanted it to be in your name and then you put it in your LLC. We can prepare the warranty deed and transfer everything over from the buyer's name into the LLC.
And are there any problems with that? Like if I'm an investor and I own a home and I want to turn it into an investment property and in order to shelter my liability, I want to put it in an LLC. Because strangers are going to be there causing havoc. What's the...
So This is kind of an attorney
gray area.
Yeah, it's a gray area, and so I don't really necessarily want to completely go out there and say anything.
Yes or
but
no.
but most of the time, if you've spoke with your lender about it, and the lender and the underwriter and everything are good, and then the lender most of the time says just deed it over after closing, and you've got the blessing on that.
Right.
So then in that case, trust, people put in trust all the time,
Right.
and so that's perfectly fine to do something like that.
Right.
So
more often than not, you run into problems when you don't pay your bill. That's really
you don't pay, you don't stay.
Right. That's really what it boils down to. There's a lot of things you can do. A lot of investors do a lot of different stuff, with properties individually. And I know, you guys specifically, Conrad did this with me one time, and we talked a lot about investing, but y'all have a lot of investors that do things with you.
I have a lot of investor business.
Yeah.
I do a lot of investor. And it was funny when COVID first started happening and the prices started shooting up, we were concerned about investors because, investors never paid full price for anything. And so it was like, wow, is this going to weed out the investors? And I feel like it hit them hard for a little bit, but then if they were pretty much the fact of if you can't beat them, join them. And my investor business has just gone through the roof.
Yeah.
So whether it's wholesaling or assignments or anything like that.
Well, and I think it speaks a little bit to where the market is in general, because I'm sure you probably get questions like this from time to time, just being in the business. But I get questions all the time. Well, are the prices going to cool off, or the rates going to go? All these things going to happen that's going to make it cheaper at some point to buy a house. And I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I can certainly feel pretty confident speaking for this area and saying no.
Yeah.
Like,
I from what I understand, I heard that it's supposed to go about 12.4-ish.
Yeah. Well, last year was somewhere between 18 to 20%, depending on where you're looking, appreciation. The year before was like 22. And then the expectation for 2022 is somewhere between 12 to 15%. And that's nationwide.
Yep.
So, when you take averages, you always have, the little bell curve where you've got the high, the low end markets, and then you've got the high end markets.
Right.
And because so many people are trying to move to Texas and we have such a large influx of humans coming here, I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
Right.
And if you're an investor, I think that's probably why you saw your investors, they cooled off for a moment, just being like, wait, what's going on?
Well, yeah.
And then came in like gangbusters because it's only going to get more expensive. Right?
It is. It absolutely is. And they found ways around the system, like we're doing assignments and things like that.
Right.
So
there's always ways to get it done. It's just a matter of how and where. And going back to resources as agents and keeping people in your contacts that are going to help you, this is again one of the things about Tiffanie that I love is because she is a closer. You sit in here and you're nuts and bolts with people all day long. You're not bringing donuts to the brokerage and warm fuzzies. That's not really your bag.
I am warm and fuzzy.
You are warm and fuzzy.
I am.
But you're just not doing the warm and fuzzy work, right?
But it's like you and I always talk about when rarely do we ever go and have lunch or do anything, and when we do, we're constantly on our phone, and because it's like, well, if you're not doing the work when it comes back, it's just going to be double and triple.
Right.
So.
Well, she called me one time. She's like, we haven't taken y'all to lunch in a long time. I'm like, what? Why do you need to take me to lunch? I'm like, she's like, well, you guys. I said, you do an awesome job. I wouldn't use you if you weren't, right? You're amazing at what you do. So, for at least for me,
it was my obligatory yearly lunch.
That's right. Yeah. Every once in a while we're gonna do that. So the last thing I want to do is because and I didn't prepare you for this, so it may take you a minute, but I'll vamp for a second while you think. I really want a story. Okay, my favorite thing about talking to people in the real estate business is we all have quirky little stories of things that occur. Okay. That and you can even talk about a builder friend, maybe. I don't know. But I always want to know, because Conrad was telling me about a guy on an investment property that camped out on his front porch. And
I closed that file.
Acting like a contractor. Yes. That's right.
I closed that file.
So what is a little story that anytime somebody says what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you in this business? What do you think? You got one?
I think Well, one of my favorite stories is, and it's not really crazy.
Okay.
But you know when you close and you have the signature affidavit?
Okay. Yes, about the names.
It's
and stuff?
basically, when they run your credit,
Right.
they have all of your names on there.
Right.
So I closed this couple, and she had all these names on her signature affidavit, okay? And her, whatever, it signed or whatever. Well,
Which, by the way, is not unusual with women because maiden names, married names.
Also, people like my name is Tiffanie.
Right.
People want to spell it wrong. So she signed the signature affidavit, and then we get to the loan app. And apparently she had a credit card issue.
Okay.
Like she liked to open credit cards
We all have
and put them in aliases.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
And so the loan app basically pulls out all of your information that has every single credit card that you've opened up, any kind of account that's
Yes, it does. Your 1003 has a list of all of your accounts that you have open in your name. Yes.
It was 12 pages of credit cards. I don't even know how this lady was able to get any credit anymore.
Wow.
And her husband goes, "What is all of this?" He, and almost he acted like he didn't know. And
How do you not know?
And she told him, "Shut up and sign it. Shut up and sign it." And he was like, "Fine, okay." He had to have known. He had to have known.
Yeah, I don't know that you could have 45 credit card accounts. I mean, unless you guys just live in different states and never talk to
He was
one
a truck
another.
driver.
Okay.
So maybe she had a way to finagle when the mail was coming in or whatever.
Well, and as I will speak for most guys, more often than not, it's just best to just be like, whatever you want, dear.
He did. He
Whatever
just
you
went
want,
ahead
dear.
and signed it.
Yes, whatever you want, because otherwise you're going to have a battle and a struggle that you're not ready to fight.
I mean, I just started going through it and I was like, what is all this?
Well, it's so funny because we have so many. I always make a joke that anytime I have friends and family that want to do loans with us, they're like, "Well, I don't know, you're see all of our tax returns, and it's kind of like going in front of a doctor or whatever." And I'm like, "Look, I would love to say that I remember all of that stuff, but it's kind of like the proctologist, right? It's like once you've seen them all, and it's just like it's all the same stuff, and I don't remember those details, like as far as how much money they made or what their credit was, or I remember the people and I remember the circumstances, but I don't ever really remember the details.
I only remember the street name. And I find that now that I've been in the business for a while, I'll drive around the Metroplex and I'll go, I've closed on that street, and I tell people in the car like they care.
Right.
You know?
They're just sitting there with you like, okay,
And they're
great.
like,
Can we
here
go
we
get
go
Subway or what
again.
are we doing?
With all the houses you closed.
Well, I really, really appreciate you taking some time to sit with me today.
Absolutely.
I know you're a busy lady, and I was able to catch her right after Thanksgiving. It was a little slower, so it wasn't insane. Usually I couldn't even fit in here because you have closings from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. every night. But so I really do appreciate you talking to me.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yes, it was. And, any agents out there that made it all the way through to the end, which if you did, God bless you. But this office and this lady right here are the best I've ever worked with. And I can't speak highly enough about them. Every agent that I talk to, every person that I deal with, I always try to get them to close with you because
I appreciate
honestly it's selfish because you just make my life so easy that I couldn't imagine doing anywhere else because anytime I have a question, anytime I have a need, she's always answering her phone. And if she can't, she'll text me, I'll call you back, I'm in closing or whatever the case may be. And I just think that's a rare thing to find with people. And I just want to say I thank you very much and I appreciate you so much.
Well, I appreciate you also.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, we got a good thing.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. I like it. So if you want to get a hold of Tiffanie, how do we do it, Tiffanie?
You can either call my office, 817-458-4332.
Okay.
You can go to the website, www.fairtexastitle.com,
Right.
or you can email me personally, twilliams@fairtexastitle.com.
And to be fair, we have your marketing person that you'll see out and about. Her name is?
Cody Riley.
Yeah, and how would you get in touch with her?
You can also call the office, same number, and she is Cody, Koty, @fairtexastitle.com. And it's Fair, Fair.
Right, not fare like a bus fare.
Yes.
Right? Is my English right on that? So yes, please reach out to them. They're conveniently located in Mansfield. We are literally right here off of Debbie Lane.
700 Hunters Row, our
Walnut Creek.
closest cross street. We're off of Debbie Lane. Our closest cross street is Walnut Creek.
Yep. So it's right here. On your way to drop off the kids at school, you can pop in, sign your deed, and be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Alrighty, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.